Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is the show where we take on the complex, the really confusing stuff, and try to pull out a clear path.
And today, we are going big.
We really are. We're doing a fundamental deep dive into navigating uncertainty. How we actually make decisions that feel right. We're going to be looking at this whole stack of sources, everything from the biology of fear all the way to quantum math.
Which is a huge range, because the material really splits into two camps. On one hand, you have the hard science of the nervous system, that immediate reaction, fear, bias, fight or flight.
Right.
And then on the other, you have these much broader, almost philosophical frameworks for the big life decisions. Things like intuition, the higher self, synchronicity.
So our mission today is to connect those two worlds. We're basically trying to map the architecture of agency itself. We want to build a bridge from those primal automatic reactions that kept our ancestors alive
to the much more sophisticated intuitive systems we use now to find clarity when life just feels completely chaotic.
We're looking for the owner's manual, the complete owner's manual for how humans make choices.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it.
Okay, so let's unpack this. And I think we have to start with the fundamentals. What is fear actually for? Because it can feel so destructive, but it's obviously essential.
It is the original survival mechanism.
Yeah.
Fundamentally, it's a natural biological response that is designed to keep us safe.
Mm-hmm.
We tend to think of it as a negative, but a healthy fear. Let's say the feeling you get when you're near a busy road. That's critical. It stops you from being careless. It ensures your immediate physical survival.
It's a protector. But you hear people talk about being fearful all the time, and what they really mean is they're avoiding a big change or a commitment. So we need to separate that true adaptive fear from just chronic avoidance.
And that is the key distinction. Fear is a natural, temporary reaction to a perceived threat. A real danger in the moment, it's adaptive. But it becomes a phobia when that reaction gets so overwhelming that it actually interferes with your ability to function. When you have to build your life around avoiding something,
Right.
That's when it's crossed the line.
Right. And when a real threat does show up, the brain can't just sit around and wait for the thinking part to, weigh the pros and cons. It needs a shortcut. What is that circuit doing?
So we're talking about these deep subcortical fear circuits, and the amygdala is really the center of it all. These paths allow for those super rapid automatic responses, fight, flight, freeze, without needing the slower, more deliberate cortical processing. It's truly instant.
So how does the brain learn what to be scared of so quickly?
So the initial learning, what we call delay fear conditioning, is supported by the amygdala. Specifically, a region where all the sensory information comes together called the lateral nucleus.
Okay, delay conditioning.
What's that? So think of it like this. A tone plays for 30 seconds, and right as it ends, you get a mild shock. Your brain learns that association incredibly fast. The lateral nucleus is basically the storage unit for that quick link between the sound and the threat.
So the primal brain handles the emergency, the super fast learning. Where does the executive brain, the prefrontal cortex, the PFC come into all this?
The PFC isn't really needed for that initial fast learning, but it is absolutely vital for regulating that fear later on. A process called extinction, which is basically learning that something that was scary is no longer a threat.
Okay.
And even more importantly, the PFC handles the higher order emotional learning, the stuff that requires context and time.
Like if the shock happens a minute after the tone ends.
Exactly. That's called trace conditioning.
Right.
Because there's a gap, you need working memory and attention.
Yeah.
You need conscious awareness to link those two events. The amygdala does the instant stuff. The PFC manages the complexity and the long-term recovery.
Speaking of immediate response, this brings us to that really surprising fact from the sources, that sometimes fear can actually feel like pleasure, the pleasure of fear.
It's called the excitation transfer process. When you're on a roller coaster or you're watching a genuinely terrifying movie, your body's just flooded with adrenaline. It's the same response as if you were in real danger.
Right.
But because your high-level PSC, your thinking brain, knows you're actually safe, you're strapped in, the monster is CGI, that stress goes away almost instantly. So what you're left with is this highly aroused physiological state.
And what's happening in that state?
The brain produces dopamine, which is tied to reward. So you get this residual high from the adrenaline, plus this sudden realization that you're safe, and it all translates into this intense feeling of pleasure after the threat is gone.
It's a chemical reward for surviving something that wasn't actually dangerous. That makes so much sense. But if it's just a chemical process, this dopamine rush, how do we stop ourselves from seeking out actual danger. If we learn to love that high, how does the brain tell the difference between a scary movie and, I don't know, a real threat?
And that's where the PFC regulation is critical again. It all comes down to appraisal. Your higher mind has to categorize that thrill as a staged threat. If you lose that distinction, if you start chasing the high without that critical risk assessment, well, that's when it can lead to some really risky maladaptive behavior.
That transition takes us right into the next piece, the psychological trap. Because fear protects us from an immediate threat, but uncertainty, which has no clear threat, that just paralyzes us.
It's a fundamental human contradiction. We are wired to crave security and control. So when we're faced with these huge unknowns, a career change, the stock market, a relationship, we feel totally powerless. And that deep uncertainty is a huge driver of chronic stress.
And to fight that feeling of powerlessness, we use what the sources call the worry illusion.
We really do. Worrying becomes this kind of psychological armor. We think if we just agonize over every single bad thing that could happen, all the what-ifs, that we are somehow preparing or pre-solving a problem.
It gives you the feeling of control.
An illusion of control, yes. But in reality, chronic worrying is completely inefficient. It gives you zero control over the future, and it just guarantees you miss out on the present and completely drains your energy.
It's such a hard habit to break, though. Logically, it's not helping, but stopping feels like you're just giving up, like you're leaving yourself unprotected.
Precisely. And to challenge it, you have to go after the core assumption your brain is making, that a bad outcome is more likely just because it's uncertain.
Right.
We have to remember that we tolerate uncertainty all the time.
That's a great point. I mean, you don't think twice about ordering takeout or getting on a plane, but when it's an emotional choice, suddenly we need a 100% guarantee.
We accept risk every single day. The key is to refocus your attention. You can't control the randomness of life, but you can control your response. So you have to focus only on the things you can actually influence.
Okay, so how do we stop that spiral? How do we anchor ourselves back in that sphere of influence?
The sources all point in one direction here: mindfulness and meditative practices. These are really just tools to ground you in the present moment. Worry lives in the future. Anxiety lives in the future. By intentionally bringing your attention back from those what-ifs to what's happening right now, you interrupt the cycle. You're training your PFC to take control of your attention instead of letting the fear circuits hijack it.
That's a perfect bridge, because once we manage the fear, we still have to make a choice. And that moves us from emotional regulation into the actual architecture of decision-making.
Exactly. And the traditional models, the classical ones, they just assume we're these perfectly rational actors, that we weigh all the options and we maximize our utility. But human choice is messy. It's full of feelings and bias and things we aren't even aware of.
Right, which classical math just can't handle, so what model can handle the messiness?
This is where quantum decision theory, QDT, comes in. It's an approach that applies the mathematical formalism of quantum mechanics, specifically Hilbert spaces, to human cognition. And that math is just uniquely good at modeling subjective experience and uncertainty.
Okay, wait, I have to stop you there, because people hear quantum and their brains just go to, the brain is a tiny quantum computer. That is not what we're saying here.
No, absolutely not. That's a great point to clarify. The brain is not a quantum computer. QDT is just using the mathematical framework, the same way an engineer uses calculus to design a bridge. The math of quantum mechanics is just really, really good at dealing with superposition and complex relationships, which is a perfect model for how our minds handle possibilities.
So what's a Hilbert space in this context? Is it like a mind palace?
That's not a bad analogy, actually. Think of it as the total potential landscape of your mind. It's this multidimensional space where all the possibilities, all your preferences, all your feelings about a decision exist at the same time.
And the most powerful metaphor from QDT is this idea of decision as measurement.
It's profound. Before you make a choice, your cognitive state is in a superposition of alternatives. You might, love Job A and also love Job B. They both exist as potential. The conscious act of choosing one, that's the measurement that collapses all that potential into one single real outcome.
This also explains the interference effect, which is so human.
Yes. The interference effect is basically indecision. So you have Job A, high pay, boring work, and Job B, low pay, fulfilling work. The classical model just has you calculate the value of each.
Right.
But in QDT, the good things about Job A, the high pay, can actually interfere with how you perceive the good things about Job B, the fulfillment. Your feelings make the options interact and kind of muddy the waters. That's what creates hesitation.
So if the quantum state is all potential, and the classical state is our stable singular reality. The sources argue that real agency, the ability to choose on purpose, it has to be a hybrid quantum classical architecture. Why? Why both?
Because a purely quantum system can't hold on to stable information. It can't make a fixed choice. Intelligence, whether it's biological or artificial, needs a stable record. It needs a way to lock in the decision and integrate it.
Okay.
The quantum seed gives you this massive parallel processing of possibilities. That's your intuition. But you need the classical resource to provide the stability, the commitment, to actually make the choice stick.
And we see this in action with the whole System 1 versus System 2 idea from psychology.
Exactly. System 1 is that fast, intuitive, non-conscious cognition. The gut feeling, the hunch. That's the quantum potential. System 2 is the slow, deliberate, effortful part of your brain, which relies heavily on the prefrontal cortex.
And that System 2 function, the conscious choice, is the essential classical resource. It takes that fast, intuitive potential and basically stabilizes it into reality. The hunch is kind of worthless until the slower mind commits to it.
You can't have agency without both. You need the insight and the commitment.
So we need fast intuition and slow deliberation. But for those huge life choices, where does the right input even come from? This is where we go beyond cognitive mechanics and into, the internal compass, the higher self.
The higher self is a concept you see everywhere, in psychology and spirituality. It's defined as the best, most aligned version of ourselves, a source of intuitive wisdom and peace that speaks with this quiet certainty.
Which is very different from the anxious, demanding voice of the ego.
A sharp contrast, yes.
And the sources give a really practical way to tell the difference. Like, for example, if you're dealing with a painful family situation.
Right. The egoic decision is fueled by fear. It wants momentary relief, so that's avoidance, escape, maybe lashing out to feel powerful for a second. The ego says, just cut them off completely, run away, stop the pain right now.
But the path of the higher self is much harder.
It is. The higher self decision requires self-compassion. It means facing the wound, choosing a path toward genuine, long-term healing. And that almost always involves difficult communication. It might guide you to set firm boundaries, but commit to a slow, difficult dialogue.
A choice that feels harder in the moment, but leads to real growth.
Exactly. The guidance is usually simple. Follow what makes your heart feel lighter, not what gives your ego a quick win.
That focus on healing instead of avoidance is key. But that brings up a really important warning, this idea of spiritual bypassing.
Spiritual bypassing is when you use spiritual ideas, meditation, affirmations, anything, to actively avoid dealing with emotional pain or psychological wounds.
So it's like using spirituality to feel emotionally numb instead of authentic.
Precisely. You're using the high of it all to sidestep the hard work of healing. Authenticity is the goal, and that means you have to accept and integrate the discomfort. You can't solve pain by pretending you're above it.
Okay, so if the higher self is our internal compass, what's the external one? This brings us to synchronicity, Carl Jung's idea of meaningful coincidence.
Jung called synchronicity a causal connecting principle. It's when an external event happens to coincide, meaningfully, with an internal psychological state, a deep question you have, a need for clarity. But there's no actual cause and effect link you can find.
It must feel like the universe is answering you.
It's deeply validating. And it's seen as a healthy function of the mind, bridging the linear physical world with the non-linear energetic realm of consciousness. Jung pointed out that ancient systems, like the I Ching, see the world through synchronism, the coincidence of events, which is so different from the Western obsession with linear cause and effect.
Can you give us a quick example?
Sure. Imagine you were just agonizing over changing careers. And then, completely at random, you bump into an old friend at a coffee shop, and it turns out they are absolutely thriving in the exact new field you were considering.
Wow.
That meeting was causally random. You both just wanted coffee. But the timing was so perfect with your inner turmoil that it provided this necessary nudge, that synchronicity at work.
This has been an incredible journey. I mean, we started with the most basic, rapid-fire defense mechanisms of our biology.
Right, with fear and the amygdala.
And we've gone all the way up through quantum math and spiritual consciousness.
We've really covered the whole stack. We started with the biological defense system. We talked about managing the paralysis of uncertainty. Then we defined the cognitive architecture you need for agency, that hybrid quantum classical system.
The System 1 intuition and the System 2 commitment.
Right, to get from potential to action. And then we finished by exploring the internal compass of the higher self and the external signs of synchronicity.
So what does this all mean? I think it means that agency is so much bigger than we think. True decision-making isn't just about, maximizing utility in a spreadsheet. It is this dynamic dance between our deep biological wiring, our slow conscious mind, and our intuition.
And that intuitive hunch, that feeling of lightness or alignment, it represents a real correlation of potential realities. It's the quantum potential.
So if real agency requires that conscious decision, that deliberate system 2 activation to lock in the intuitive hunch and make it real, what conscious choice are you currently avoiding that might be the critical piece you need to define your next most aligned trajectory? The choice is what turns the potential into the real.